Good day, everyone. I call this meeting to order. It's 17 minutes past 8 in the morning. We would like to get going. Welcome to the meeting, to the fourth meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted on the 18th of September 2025, the committee is meeting as part of its study on suicide prevention among veterans. I welcome you all.
Format pursuant to the standing orders, and members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. And before we continue, I would ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. And toujours un plaisir de vous avoir, chers aides.
It's always a pleasure to have you with us, interpreters.
On the card, which links to a short awareness video. Excusez-nous. Pour garantir le bon déroulement.
To ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, I would like to give some instructions to witnesses and to members. Before speaking, wait until I call on you by name. If you are participating via video conference, I know that we do have one person by video conference. Please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation now, those on Zoom can choose between French, English, or the floor at the bottom of your screen. Those in the room can use the headphones and select the desired channel. I would remind you that all comments from members and witnesses must be addressed to the chair. For members present in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. Our clerk and I as well always do our best to maintain the order of speaking, and we thank you for your patience and understanding in this regard. Now, I would like to welcome our witnesses.
National Defence, Major General Scott Malcolm, Surgeon General, Canadian Armed Forces. Brigadier General Serge Menard, Commander, Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, Canadian Armed Forces. From the Department of Veterans Affairs, Steve Harris, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery. Sid Courchesne, Director General, Health Professional and Chief Medical Officer, and Dr. Amy Hall, Senior Epidemiologist, who's joining us virtually. So thank you very much for being here. We look forward to hear your comments. So, parfait. Donc sur ça, nous allons commencer avec M.
We will begin by hearing Mr. Harris.
Members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to appear today as you launch your study of suicide prevention among veterans. I would like to begin by acknowledging the veterans, service members, and families who join us today and express condolences to those who've lost a loved one. Suicide among veterans is not just a statistic. It is a tragedy that is felt through families, our communities, and our country. Cependant, il est important.
However, it is important to note that Canadian veterans face a significantly higher risk of suicide than the general population, particularly among younger veterans and female veterans. The 2024 report on suicide mortality in the Canadian Armed Forces revealed that among those who have died by suicide, 65% had at least one mental health disorder, and many had more than one. The most common disorders were substance use and addiction, depressive disorders, and trauma and stress-related disorders. Research also confirms that mental health issues among veterans are significantly higher than in the general population, Mood disorders are reported by approximately 17% of regular force veterans, compared to only 6% of civilians.
Stress injuries, or OSIs, capture the persistent challenges resulting from service. OSIs can include PTSD, depression, anxiety, trauma, and moral injury, and they can disrupt daily functioning, work, and social relationships. PTSD is particularly prevalent among the veterans receiving disability benefits. More than 48,000 veterans currently receive a pension for PTSD. Since the end of Canada's mission in Afghanistan in 2014, we have observed a steady rise in these claims. Approximately 29% of veterans receiving a disability benefit for PTSD.
Mr. Harris, you're too rapide, s'il vous plaît. Nos interprètes essaient avec beaucoup de mérite de vous traduire.
You were a little too quickly. Our interpreters are interpreting you, but thank you so much, sir.
In Afghanistan in 2014, we have observed a steady rise in these claims. Approximately 29% of veterans receiving a disability benefit for PTSD served in Afghanistan, underscoring the lasting impact of the mission. Ancien Combattant Canada comprend les...
Veteran Affairs Canada understands the impact of service on physical and mental health and offers a range of support measures designed to address these challenges. These include treatment and care options, financial and rehabilitation support, and support measures to assist veterans throughout their transition journey. For example, since April 2022, a new mental health benefits program has been in place, automatically covering the treatment costs of veterans with mental health issues, while their disability benefit claims are being assessed.
To a network of 21 occupational stress injury clinics and satellite locations, as well as thousands of registered mental health professionals across Canada. Veterans can take advantage of in-person, virtual, or one-on-one support and online options. Families play a central role in supporting mental health outcomes. The Occupational Stress Injury Social Support Program provides confidential support to military members, veterans, and their families through trained peers who have lived through similar experiences. Leaving the military is not just as simple as changing jobs. It is a complete shift in identity, structure, and community. Service members may lose their daily routine and missions that have defined their lives for years. They move from a close-knit team environment to a civilian world that often may not understand their military culture. Our national client survey shows that 33% of clients transitioning out of the military have reported difficulty transitioning to life after service. Of these, 64 attributed the difficulty to health challenges, while 60 felt as though they lost their sense of purpose. Pour apporter son soutien pendant cette période.
To provide support during this critical period, VAC is working closely with the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure continuity of mental health care and support during the transition from service to life after service. As a result of this collaboration, the Joint Suicide Prevention Strategy was announced in 2017. This strategy builds on VAC's 7 domains of well-being and the strong foundation of existing programs. Thanks to this work, more psychologists and psychiatrists have been added to healthcare teams, and improvements now allow for remote consultations as well.
Not only about programs and policies. It's about building a culture of care that values our veterans and their families, recognizing the warning signs of mental health challenges, and providing the support and connection that can save lives. Families, peers, and communities are essential to this work, ensuring that veterans are not navigating these challenges alone. It is through this collective effort that we honor the service of our veterans, protect their well-being, and uphold our commitment to those who have given us so much. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. We are happy to take your questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. We will now begin with questions. Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate the presentation. One of the things that I think often can lead to bad, poor outcomes for veterans, and therefore sometimes lead down the road to things like mental health challenges or addictions or unfortunately, in some cases, suicidal thoughts or actually the act itself, is what many refer to as sanctuary trauma. And that's when, the trauma comes from those who they expect to care for them. In the case of VAC, it's something we unfortunately hear too often, that veterans feel like they've come for support, and then they face outrageous wait times. They face piles of forms and paperwork, constant changes in their case managers, denials of care, and on and on and on. And often it leads veterans to feel betrayed, and they feel like they're just not cared for. I guess what I want to ask you is, do you believe that sanctuary trauma is a real concern and something that you need to take into account when you're considering your processes and changes at Veterans Affairs?
Madam Chair, I would say the thoughts, the feelings, the perspectives of veterans are always something that need to be taken into consideration from our department, from the services, and from all of our staff who work to deliver services to veterans, and our colleagues in every area as well. So I accept that sanctuary trauma is absolutely something that veterans feel, and that it has an effect on whether or not they want to come forward and work with Veterans Affairs to obtain the services that they actually really need.
Okay. And I mean, what sort of things have you done, taking that into consideration, to improve? We often hear about the lengthy wait times, the delays, the denials, the massive amount of paperwork. Even the fact that doctors refuse to take veterans on in many cases, family doctors, because the VAC paperwork is just so burdensome that it's just something they can't navigate. So you can only imagine how the veteran themselves feels. What sort of improvements are you working towards to try to make sure that veterans aren't experiencing that sanctuary trauma? Because at the end of the day, it's great to recognize it, but something has to be done to make sure it doesn't happen.
Would 100% agree. What we have done and what we are continuing to do is identify and work on the things that the members identify as suggested here. And so cutting wait times in half over the course of the last 4 years, cutting the amount of time that it takes to get approvals on a whole range of programs from Veterans Affairs, working really directly with veterans through case management, through our veteran service agents, to make sure that they understand what might be necessary to go through a process, but also reducing the amount of paperwork that might be necessary to go through that process as well. Whether that's reapprovals or other things that veterans may come back for, other services, us coming to the veteran with, this is another service that might be benefit to you, as opposed to having to have the veteran identify something or a need that may be unaddressed. And so I think those are all parts of the kinds of things that we are both trying to do and succeeding at over the course of the last number of years.
Okay, well, I appreciate the efforts. I'm not certain that I hear the same kind of sentiment from veterans about succeeding at it, unfortunately. So hopefully you can continue your efforts. Hopefully we'll see better results as a result of that. I guess along the same lines, we often hear veterans report how much they struggle when they watch Veterans Affairs kind of just fail at some of the really simple, basic things. I'll give you an example, and then we're going to talk about commemoration in this case, although it's not the only area. When the 10th anniversary of the withdrawal from Afghanistan came around in 2024, there was a lot of veterans that sort of reported not receiving invites, or they were just invited like 24 hours before. It kind of seemed like it was a really thrown together ceremony. That was something that even CBC criticized, as it really appeared rushed. Or, when they look at the Afghanistan monument, announced 11 years ago now, nothing has been done on the site at all. I think it's been 3 years since there was kind of an announcement of, here we've chosen our contractor. We'll put aside all the controversy around that, of course, but 3 years it still sat there, nothing's happened. And I think veterans often watch things like that and say, if they can't even do that, how can I expect them to properly care for my injuries and the needs that I have? And I guess I would ask, what would you say to veterans who are feeling that way?
I think quickly I'd say in terms of it's more than efforts. We've actually cut wait times in half. We've cut the backlog in half as well. So it's more than just efforts on that front. With respect to commemoration, well, that's not entirely my area of responsibility in the department. I know the team that works on commemoration works very diligently to make sure that it's inclusive and moving forward on all of the projects in terms of inviting folks to attend commemoration ceremonies, but also on the Afghan monument. I know recently the NCC's announced their approval of going forward in the next stage of the project. It's a multi-stage project. I know that was just done recently as part of moving ahead with the construction of the monument as well. And so I'd just offer that.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess, you know, it's one thing to say, you know, we're moving.
Vigilant this time. Thank you very much. I would now invite MP Sidhu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to join this committee today for the important study regarding suicide prevention among veterans. First, I would like to thank the official from the Department of National Defense and Veteran Affairs Canada for appearing at this committee today to share the important insights with Canadian. And this month is also Women's History Month, and I'll like to use this opportunity to thank all women members of the Canadian Armed Forces and servicewomen, past and present, for their sacrificing, safeguarding Canada and its interests. Now, even in the last Parliament, I had the honor to serve the Standing Committee of the Status of Women. I was pleased to see the report titled Invisible No More, the experiences of Canadian women veterans. Now I have a question for both officials from both departments. If you can share to the committee what existing programs there are for women veterans in terms of suicidal prevention.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. We really appreciated the report of the study on women veterans that came out after we had considered our suicide prevention plan. As my ADM mentioned in his opening remarks, we have known since we've looked at numbers, that women veterans have a higher rate of suicide than male veterans and than women in the Canadian general population. And so we had that knowledge when we created the suicide prevention plan. Since then, we've established a unit of women's veterans looking at their issues, listening to women. We've had several forums where we've heard their particular issues. We've, based on that information, we've looked at our business processes, we've looked at our criteria for looking at the application from women veterans, and taken that into consideration and made changes, because through going back and looking, we knew that applications from women veterans were more frequently turned down, took more time, so we've put efforts to look at our table of disabilities, our entitlement eligibility guidelines, taking into account differences between men and women. I like to say women are not small men, and so they're different physiologically, they present differently clinically, and so we've taken all of that into account to bring changes.
Thank you. Could you also tell the committee, is the Veteran Affairs Canada's plan to address this to the suicide prevention, especially for women veterans?
Could you repeat that, please?
Can you share with this committee on what is the Veteran Affairs Canada's plan to address to the suicide prevention, especially for women veterans?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, we continue to to look into our numbers through research. The veteran suicide mortality study, like I mentioned, has shown that the rates are higher. What it doesn't tell us is why. We know that male veterans are at higher risk within 5 years of leaving the military. For women, it's 20 years. And because all veterans are not clients of the department, it's difficult for us to predict who's at risk, which is why we focus on programs offering mental health services that are accessible for women at any point after they leave the military, whether they're our clients or not. For example, our VAC assistance line, you don't need to be a client of the department to access those services. So making our services known is very important to promote that anybody can come to the department anytime after they leave the military.
How you of care, Mr. Harris, you said culture of care. Can you elaborate on that?
I think the answer to that is really all throughout the organization, making sure that everybody is focused on the well-being of the veteran and their family. That includes things like trauma-informed training. I know, Madam Chair, the committee had an opportunity to have a session on trauma-informed training. That's something that is front and center for us as all of our frontline staff go through trauma-informed training. But it's care throughout. It's looking for opportunities to help serve and support veterans when they come to us and when we're working with them.
Thank you. I have the great but also very sad role of making sure that our time is respected. So I apologize in advance to all our witnesses and also to all my fellow colleagues. Sorry about that. J'aimerais maintenant inviter Madame Gaudreau pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Gaudreau, now you have 6 minutes, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Not easy, your work, because on a day-to-day basis, you have to face a number of difficult situations. As member of a committee, the committee here of Veterans Affairs, we are discussing prevention, of course, but from the outset, it's really important to discuss the facts and state them clearly. Here, we, of course, are highly respectful, and I have an important question about how our veterans are seen and treated. So I have a very specific question about the statistics. As of a decade, are there more suicide attempts or actual suicides? Do you have data on that? Yes, we do. We have that data, and we follow that closely in our studies since 1975. These studies are carried out together with the Canadian Armed Forces and with Statistics Canada, such that we can state that we do know that the rates are higher than in the general population. For women, it's at 1.8, men 1.4. And this has been a stable figure since 1975. It hasn't changed, you see. And that is our challenge, to locate trends and causes in that data. And we know that for suicide, there are a number of factors that contribute. It's multifactorial, not a single factor. So although we have these figures, we can't really start discerning causes because sometimes we have veterans who aren't active clients. They're out in the community. So thanks to Statistics Canada, we are able to triangulate across that data. But I can tell you with confidence that the rate is no higher than it was in 1975. And that's up to the last year that we do have statistics for, and I believe that's 2016. All right. Following the Afghan war, if the figures haven't changed and you have a stable set of figures, if we really work closely with veterans, how is it that we haven't brought those suicide rates down? Why isn't prevention working? Could you explain that? Madam Chair, thank you for the question. That is the considerable challenge we're working with, and it is a considerable challenge in psychiatry, in medicine, and in the community at large. Prevention. Now, with our suicide prevention strategy, well, the difficulty with any such strategy is measurement. You can't measure what hasn't yet occurred. We must rely on the rates, which we continue to monitor. And the rates are no higher, at least up until 2016. Next year, we will be publishing yet another report, which will add a few years to that, more recent years. So we are really watching the figures closely. Madam Chair, these are specialists, if they would be able to give us any specific recommendations, because I find this deeply troubling. We should be able to do better with our veterans, given what they have done for us. And all said and done, perhaps you haven't enough methods, enough means available to you, but could you tell me, if we could really pull things around 180 degrees, what would be needed to do that? More resources, more psychiatrists, people who could respond more quickly, because we know suicide takes place, in a blink of an eye. Is it the amount of money you have? Are there things you could tell us about that we could provide you with that would change the situation? Madam Chair. Once again, it's a considerable challenge because we cannot yet point to any specific cause, any single cause. If we could, our prevention programming would target it or target them and be far more efficient. But when we don't really know what the underlying causes are, and again, there are so many factors at play, and it isn't always necessarily the mental health issue that has been the trigger of the actual act. Thus, it's very difficult to set in measures, and we don't exactly know what we're battling. We can, of course, assume a number of things, and on that we do base our programming, such that our strategy addresses these 7 areas of well-being: finances, security, safety, job security, and commemoration, of course. That is an important factor, very important to recognize the services rendered, and that is a mandate that we have in the department. Madam Chair, 1 second only. All right. Could you send us later your recommendations? Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We have now finished our first round of questions. We will move into the second round of questions. Mr. Toomey, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Having the witnesses here, and thank you for your service. And I know that I'd like to ask the Brigadier General and Major General, when you're in the military, part of the training is to recognize, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the training in the military is to recognize maybe some of your comrades going through maybe suicidal thoughts. Is that correct? Could you share a little bit about what that is?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So I would suggest, particularly when we talk about, in the military about, looking out for 1-6, so one's back. That's that idea of buddy care. So indeed, it's more than just recognizing if someone is displaying suicidal thoughts, but just if things aren't quite right, because rarely does it just start, with someone is immediately suicidal. There's signs that something perhaps is not quite right with them. And your buddies and your chain of command are the ones who see them every day and are best placed, including their families, to note if there's a change going on.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. Mr. Harris, are any of the case managers trained to recognize veterans who may be having suicidal thoughts?
The answer simply is yes. Everybody has training in suicide assist training, more specifically in most cases, that recognizes and helps them to work with veterans or anyone else who may call.
Okay, so when you're in the military, you've got your comrades. When you're a veteran, you're alone. And how you access your case manager is usually by phone and by email. How can the case managers recognize someone that's having suicidal thoughts by phone or by email?
I think, unfortunately, the answer is the veteran's quite honest about it and shares where they're at and where they're feeling quite often. We do have calls from veterans who are suicidal, and we do have case managers, our veteran service agents, even our call center agents who help them work through what they're facing. People can also come into our offices, of course, as well, Madam President. And so there's lots of ways in which we can do that. We can go out and meet people as well. So it's not limited to just email or phone call, but even in those instances, there are signs that we are trained to look for and be clear on, even if they're not being very clear about it.
So our challenge here is that we have people that are in a buddy system where their buddies can check out and say, okay, listen, I think we've got to have a conversation with you. Something's not right. They leave. And what you're saying is those that are forthright, that are having suicidal thoughts and mental health issues are the ones that are going to come forward. The problem is, how do we track the ones that don't come forward and that don't share and need that help? So those are the ones that we're missing, and how do we capture that?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, we do have, as part of our suicide prevention plan, we instituted mental health first aid. That's available to veterans, their family members, and so this is a way of continuing because it's not just on one individual, it's educating the surroundings. And so this has been ongoing since we released the suicide prevention plan. It's very popular. All our sessions fill up very quickly, and we also have the peer support program. And so they're also available to veterans, and we promote that.
Okay, thank you, and I'm glad that you touched on that, because that's the peer group, right, that those vets have. And so are you doing training for spouses, and how is that rolled out? And how is that available?
Madam Chair? Yes, we do. We have family peer support, and we have peer support. So we cover all bases.
Look at my time, eh?
I'm sorry, I was nice the first day, but we're
You didn't
back.
have to cut
We're
me off.
military back, It's like, I would now invite MP Clark. Mr. Clark, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Harris, earlier you touched on, you mentioned wait times cut in half, backlog cut in half. Could you just explain a little bit more what you're referring to and what impact, in your view, that has on the work that you're doing around suicide prevention as well?
Sure, I think there's a couple of things to note as a result of that. The very first one is, for a long time, we've had, and we still continue to have, and I want to be completely clear about it, files beyond our service standard. Veterans Affairs has a disability benefits program that's usually the first intake, often of veterans who've had an illness or an injury in the military, and they come and they apply for disability benefits related to their service. The service standard is that we give them a decision within 16 weeks, 80% of the time. We've not been successful at doing that over the last number of years. In fact, the files beyond that period grew to about 23,000 files in 2020. We've successfully cut that in half, and we've cut the wait times that individuals have had to wait to get a decision down to 22 weeks. It was up to around 40 before. What that means is veterans are getting access to decisions much more quickly than they were before. We're still not at our service standard. We still need to get there, and there's work to do on that front. But it means that people are getting decisions much earlier than they were even 4 years ago. Secondly, that means access to treatment. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we have a mental health benefit, that as soon as somebody applies for a mental health condition, they get access to treatment. That was put in place a couple of years ago. But it also means that people who are getting a decision more quickly are getting access to treatment for physical injuries as well. And so when we get a decision much more quickly to the veteran, in any case, whether it's physical and in particularly for mental health, we know that if you have to wait longer for it, the individual, the veteran themselves is going to suffer and probably get worse before they get better. We need to get decisions to them quickly, and that's why the investment has been made to help speed up that process and also make sure that they can have immediate access to mental health supports when they need it.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I wanted to touch as well on the issue of data and tracking. And Madame Courchesne, you mentioned, I believe, that the rate has not really changed since 1975, I believe. But as you touched on, it's also impossible to prove a negative or track something that has not happened, I guess. How do you manage that, I guess? How do you crack that nut? I know it's a difficult thing to figure out, but the rate may be constant over time, but again, there may be many people who are living happy, productive lives that otherwise might not be. So could you just touch a bit on how you think you can figure that puzzle out a bit? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Even though we can't get to the root cause, that trigger that pushes someone to follow through, we gather more information on we just don't have the rate, but we know for men, it's younger men, non-commissioned members. And so working with our colleagues from the Transition Center, we can target that population to make sure they're screened, things are in place as they leave the military. And so, we gather more information like that until we get to a point where we will crack that nut. So we keep learning through continued research in this.
Thank you very much. And one other question around communications, I guess, with any government program, obviously, letting people know that it exists and that they have access to it is really important. But in these cases, I think, obviously, critically important when we're dealing with life and death issues at times. So could you just, perhaps Mr. Harris, this is a question for you, I'm not sure, could you just give us a sense of how you assess the ability of veterans to know about these programs, not necessarily an access point, that's the second step. The first point is, hey, this is available for you, this could really help you. How do you communicate that to the veteran community across the country to make sure that they know what they have access to?
The answer is we do it as often and in as many places as possible. And so obviously we do it through channels that we would have, whether that's through social media, that we have through our website, things of that nature. But we also go out and meet with veterans quite regularly, whether that's at a Legion, whether that's at military events, whether that's at ministerial advisory group committees and others that are there. We're constantly trying to put out information not only into the hands of veterans, but other military members, other military organizations, to be able to share with them, and in the opportunity to try and get everybody informed as to where they can go for help. If the veteran doesn't know, maybe somebody else does, family members otherwise, and we make sure we try and get the information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. J'aimerais inviter Madame Gaudreau pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Gaudreau, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very aware and very thankful for the reduced wait times and backlog. I know that you are doing everything you possibly can, but would you agree with me that when there's any sort of wait time and the situation is urgent, do you agree that this is unacceptable? do you think there's room for a big change in the speed? It's not our sole program. To be clear, the Disability Benefits Program is one of the programs available to veterans. It's one of the most important ones, of course, and any wait time is unacceptable. We're working very hard to bring down wait times across the board, not only for disability benefits, but for all the rest of our programming as well, not only by adding more resources, more human resources, more staff to help, but also by reducing the amount of documents needed, by training our people, by improving our systems as well to be able to process material more quickly. I can tell you that last year we carried out more measures and made more decisions regarding this programming than ever. This is good to hear, Madam Chair, but that said, with the upcoming 5% pledged to defense, we need to consolidate. We need to ensure that we have a solid force. I want to ensure that what you've been doing over the last year will contribute to that, and that you will have everything you need, all the tools you need to continue. Last question about women. We've heard that it's about the same percentage of suicides, but mortality for the forces, it seems that women are dying more than men. And what is that about? Is it suicide? If it's not suicide? And perhaps we can ask the Surgeon General. When it comes to mortality rates among women, specifically by suicide, death by suicide, it's a very difficult matter to figure out because if you have the data, and of course any suicide is too many suicides, but it seems that there are more of them among women. That is the data. It's not that much of a difference, but nevertheless, it is more. So, as my colleagues from Veteran Affairs have said, we continue to follow up on this, looking for the reasons underlying these figures. Plenty factors come into play, and I must say that members who have followed through and died by suicide are both in the forces and veterans. This, of course, doesn't mean that the root of the problem set in while they were in active duty. We know that about 50% of them had experienced trauma before they actually joined the forces. So that is one of the factors. Suicide is a societal issue. We need to start at the base, build up with prevention approaches across the board, not only within the armed forces, but within the population in general. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. At this point, Ms. Wagenthal, you have the floor.
And thank you all for being here. I want to bring forward something that we discussed at our last meeting when the Veterans Ombuds was here. And she had a recommendation from 2021 regarding mental health treatment benefits for family members in their own right for the conditions related to military service independent of the veteran's treatment plan and regardless of whether the veteran is engaged in treatment. This is something that has been discussed a lot at this committee as well, and it was affirmed. That recommendation was affirmed by the government. It had a yes beside it. But in the last 4 years, it has not been implemented at all. So we all know in the most challenging circumstances when the veteran struggles with mental health, the family then struggles, then the veteran struggles more, and it becomes a very caustic and dangerous cycle for the veteran and the family members that they have alienated. So I want to say that she affirmed VAC and the work that you do meeting family needs whenever you can, when the veteran is being treated and the veteran affirms the family members getting that assistance is required. So kudos to that. That's great. But in the end, that's all that you can do because that's all you have legal authority to do, from my understanding. That's the lane that you have to work in. So what that means is if a veteran isn't being treated, the family can't access mental health treatment. And if a veteran is estranged or separated or divorced from their significant other, that individual and probably the children can't access mental health. And if the veteran is being treated but doesn't support family members receiving that treatment, again, they don't get it. And also right now, and this was very troubling to me, if a veteran dies, the family is immediately cut off from mental health and services. So if that veteran dies by suicide, I would think at that point in time, that family needs mental health care more than ever. So here's my question, finally. There's barriers here that need to be taken down according to the government and this committee, and I think yourselves. So have you tried reaching out to the government where you have to go to get that extended authority to be able to provide those services? So have you reached out to the government and had any interaction with them about providing this specific care to family members? Because we say when the veteran serves, when the member serves, the family serves. So have you reached out and had any conversations or interaction in this regard with the government?
So a couple of things. One, the member and the ombudsperson are quite correct. Legislative authority does not exist for us to provide those services in their own right to family members. There are a number of other services that are available for families, such as the VAC Assistance Service, which can be used by any family member who's facing a mental health issue or crisis, that can give them 20 sessions with a mental health provider. That can be used at any time. There's a veteran family program through military family resource centers. All of those are correct. I can't speak to proposals that have gone forward as a recommendation to the government. I can tell you that there are lots of ways that we continue to help to support families in addition to what you said. And there are considerations in all circumstances for when a family may be impacted by something like suicide, where we continue to help support that family as best we can with access to resources.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate that. And I think that it's something specific here that would be very helpful to members that are serving as well, knowing that it usually takes years before they really get hit hard. Sometimes these younger ones that are serving in the military get hit when they realize, I think, their commitment that they've made to Canada. But I think it's something that both the Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs could work on together to get that extended care more specific to the family members. Just about the statistics that you've worked with, what years was that between?
The 1975 to 2016.
Okay.
But my colleague from research, Dr. Hall, might confirm that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so what we have worked with are suicide numbers long past the First and Second World Wars and prior to our biggest commitment through Afghanistan. So I am assuming that at this point in time you must have some information about those numbers if you are coming up with a report shortly, so we'll be looking for that. But do you have lists? Oh.
The list, but that's it. Sorry,
okay,
Madam.
Okay. I'm wondering if you do have actual lists of specific veterans that have died by suicide. And I know that veterans have lists if you were to reach out to them. That's my comment.
Yeah, so this is something that you can either provide to the committee or through other questions
I don't expect
pursue.
names.
I apologize. As I say, I am...
No, you're doing great, Chair.
Well, I don't know. Mrs.
I wouldn't say.
Madam Ertl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thank you all again for being here today, and thank you for your service. I'd like to circle back. There was a reference made earlier to peer group support, and I'd like to come back to that as an important element for veterans and CAF members to feel more connected and less alone. The transition to civilian life can be challenging, and members may experience disruptions, of course, to social connections during this period of transition. What is the strategy of the CAF regarding the mental health of members transitioning to civilian life? Perhaps Brigadier General Menard could best answer that.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, thank you very much for the question. So the way we support our veterans is through the transition centers, and the way we provide services, we build the services provided behind the 7 domains of well-being. So what we do is we have a group of technical experts that analyzes the 7 domains of well-being to come up with a portrait of the person that is about to release. And based on the situation of the releasing members, we have different networks of support as well to propose to provide services to our releasing members.
Okay, thank you. Can you expand on the 7 domains of well-being for me, please?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. So the 7 domains are related to the sense of purpose of the person, the situation related to health, the housing situation of the person, the person's social network, the aspect of respect and recognition, the financial security of the person, and the ability to adapt and cope. So those are the 7 domains that we assess when we meet a person.
Thank you. So the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group provides education and training on transition from military to civilian life for members, yes? Can you tell us which transition services are offered to CAF members and their families, and then what impact do you think these services have?
Thank you again, Madam Chair, for the question. So first, I'd like to say that we try to meet the person as early as possible when they think about transitioning. So it can go up to 6 months before they decide to retire. So we want to extend the transition period and fill the gap between their time in service and when they become a veteran. So again, based on the analysis of the 7 domains, we provide support to those members related to issues or risks that we've identified through the analysis.
Okay, thank you. Someone said earlier that not all veterans are clients. Do you have a sense of how many veterans are not currently clients? Is there any way to know?
So the census would tell us there's 461,000 veterans in Canada. Depending on any given time, maybe a third of them are clients of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We also provide supports for our Canadian Mounted Police veterans as well. So they're included as part of our client group as well. But not every veteran who releases from the military requires the support of Veterans Affairs, but we are here whether they need it when they are releasing and going through that transition process, or whether somebody comes back to us 5, 10, even 50 years later. We've had people come back with illness or injury related to their service that they've been dealing with for a long time.
Thank you. Is 6 months sufficient in your thoughts then, or should we be starting earlier before they're released to?
I think it's a sufficient time. We always have to be helping to work with our Canadian Armed Forces colleagues to make sure that military serving members, when they're thinking about release, if they want to release, great. If they want to do something else in the Canadian Armed Forces and move somewhere else in the area, that's fine. But I think 6 months is sufficient as part of the transition. What we need to do is make sure that there's follow-up post-transition, whether there are issues that develop during that period of time.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now at the our third round. I'll invite MP Versen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for being here today. When we think about why people commit suicide, there's generally a whole number of questions that they're asking. Why does evil exist? Why are we here? There's things that I've done. There's things that I've seen. What's my value? Does anybody care? These are all like questions that people that are suicidal are thinking about. And many of our church communities have answers to all of these questions. And we've seen over the last number of years fairly hostile treatment of church communities from the government. We've seen attempts to strip them of their charitable status. We've seen perhaps attacks on the chaplaincy, saying they shouldn't pray in public and things like that. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Harris, what's the relationship of your organization with our faith communities, with our church communities across the country? Do you engage them at all in the providing the services that your department provides? I know that our church communities have the answers to a lot of these questions, have the resources to support veterans, and also are able to provide a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie to veterans, for sure. So just wondering if you could comment on that.
I'm not sure how broadly I can speak to it. I can indicate, pastoral services is something that is available through our VAC assistance service, and so if individuals are facing difficult challenges and they reach out, we can help connect them with pastoral services and a range of faith-based pastoral services. In that sense, I know a number of organizations who are quite keen and interested in helping people who are either suffering from homelessness or mental health issues, addictions issues in those areas. And so there have been a number of, I believe, homelessness-based shelters that have a faith-based connection that are equally supported through some grants from Veterans Affairs and our Veterans and Wellbeing Fund in the past as well. We would certainly encourage for individuals to find their comfort wherever they need to find it, and that's important.
I guess I can particularly pick on one of the churches. Is the Salvation Army has a very military feel to it. It seems like an easy bridge to cross, essentially. What's your relationship with the Salvation Army?
I'm not sure we have a real relationship from a holistic point of view. They frequently attend remembrance and commemoration ceremonies. You'll often see them there. They're a very good charitable organization to help in areas where, whether it's government or other community entities can't help. So they're a very present organization. But I wouldn't say we have a full-scale relationship on any front.
Is there a particular reason why?
No, I'd say they're just one group amongst many who help to support veterans.
Okay.
And so we would have connections with them in that sense.
Is there any direction given to not pursue that relationship?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Switching gears a bunch, I've followed this. The other countries around the world have similar challenges with veterans and suicide. The Americans have really integrated with a lot of the social media companies around identifying potential suicide attempts, suicide victims. Do you have a relationship with some of these big players, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Some of these people, like not all veterans have an online presence, but some of these people are very apt at, I'm thinking about Instagram in particular. They recognize that their services were causing suicide, and so they've put a lot of effort into trying to prevent suicide. Have you had these conversations with any of these organizations?
We've had some partnerships with social media companies around things like commemoration and in particular Remembrance Day, where they've partnered on a particular element or two. We do a very significant mental health benefits campaign quite regularly, often in social media, to ensure that veterans
have they ever flagged to you, hey, we suspect this person's a veteran, we suspect that they're suicidal, can you reach out to them? Has that ever happened? Is there a process for that?
No, we've not had that where somebody's come forward from a company social media point of view. We don't monitor social media outside of the ones that are controlled by Veterans Affairs. And so if there are comments on our own social networks, then we will take action to address it if we can, and follow up with somebody who might be expressing something that is troubling for them. But that would only be on our social networks.
Okay, thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Madame Auguste.
Thank you very much, Ms. Auguste. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Harris, in your opening statement, you discussed the joint suicide prevention strategy. Could you or your colleagues provide us with more details of that so that we can better understand that strategy, and also tell us what specific issues have been identified before people are released and after they're released? Perhaps I'll turn to my colleague, Ms. Courchesne. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. The prevention strategy was drawn up by both CAF and VAC. We worked with the armed forces. As we've mentioned, we worked from the 7 areas of well-being. That was our basis. But given that we are 2 different groups, we drew up different action plans. The strategy has been published and is in the public record. It's on our website. There are 63 action elements for Veterans Affairs. I can't tell you all of them from memory, but it is a 5-year strategy. The strategy has now come to an end, but the activities are ongoing. So 50% of the measures that we brought in are now ongoing. For example, training in first aid for mental health. That is something that was in the action plan, and we are continuing to offer it. Another element was working closely with media about how they speak of suicides among military veterans and active forces. We worked on that with the Atlas Institute, our Center for Excellence. They worked with McGill University and media specialists to work directly with media to ensure that they spoke in a responsible manner of these unfortunate situations. And all this is available to the public, and of course we could also provide you with the information if you wish. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to address Dr. Hall. Could you please explain to us what your role is as a medical specialist with the Department of Veterans Affairs?
Chair, for the question. As an epidemiologist, I look at veteran health and well-being at the population level. So looking beyond the client population at VAC, looking at larger trends in the broader population.
Merci. Thank you. And for how long now have the departments been following this closely, and at what level of detail are you doing so?
So, as Dr. Courchesne has mentioned, we've been looking at suicide at a population level in veterans since, actually, we started in 2015, and we've released a number of reports over time, with the most recent being in 2021.
Parfait. Puis, very well. Have you drawn any important or relevant conclusions from that study that you want to share with us here today?
Sure. Well, I believe they've been touched on for the most part through Dr. Courchesne's comments. Basically, we followed veterans who have released from the Canadian Armed Forces between 1975 and 2016, and we see, increased risks for both male and female veterans, and those risks over that 42-year observation period have remained relatively stable over time.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Now I turn to Ms. Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Dr. Hall. In 2018 to 2022, it's been demystified. 39% of the suicides were related to depression and 41% to addiction. As a psychosociologist, I am very concerned by the use of drugs, including those that can be prescribed by a health professional. But of course, this could also consist of self-medication that, of course, adds to the risk of death by suicide. So I would like to hear you on how we could demystify this link in order to prevent more suicides and do that upstream.
A question, Madam Chair. We don't, in the study that I mentioned, looking at suicide over time, we don't collect information, or I should say the information on specific behaviors around substance use aren't available. VAC is leading and funding various research initiatives that are focused on, for instance, cannabis for medical purposes, also looking at other alternate and emerging therapies in mental health care, but we're not actually leading any studies at the moment looking at links between substance use and suicide in veterans.
J'ai une question de la suite des événements.
I have a question about follow-up once the veteran has gone home, has been released. Year in and year out, they continue their life, and so does the family that also is involved in what the veteran has lived through. And of course, we know that these are things that people keep to themselves very often, but that then something can occur that becomes a trigger later on. Do you think that we have enough programming to prevent suicide? So, and we haven't enough? I don't want to say that it's insufficient, but there's always more that we can try to do. We are, on an ongoing basis, trying to improve our programming. I can't say it's perfect, and nor can I say it's insufficient, because that's not quite what I'm saying. So you're confident that enough is being done, and you can sleep with that at night, even though you think it's insufficient. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Couple of things that I have. First, let me just ask to our Canadian Armed Forces generals that are with us here. Mr. Tolmie touched on this a little bit earlier, but suicide rates amongst veterans are much higher than in the general population. I believe it's 50% higher, 200% higher for younger veterans. But if you look at suicide amongst members, active serving members of the CAF, it's about the same as the general population. Can you tell us why you think that might be, that the rates amongst serving members aren't much higher as they are with veterans?
Madam Chair, thanks. Thank you for the question. So we have published, and it's publicly available online, our annual mortality study on suicide. We have shown, in fact, that rates for males and females are higher than the general public, but as was stated by my colleague from Veterans Affairs, Dr. Courchesne, those rates tend to be stable over time. So I can't really conjecture and would turn to my colleagues from Veterans Affairs to perhaps comment if they, based on the work of Dr. Hall and the experience of Dr. Courchesne, if they feel that there's any explanation why the rates are higher on the veterans side. But I will just remind that, again, given the multifactorial nature of suicide, it becomes difficult to pinpoint, the exact drivers.
Okay, thanks. If you do have an answer to that, anyone from Veterans Affairs, if you can just give me like a really short 10 seconds, I have another question I wanted to ask as well.
Yeah, Madam Chair. As I stated, if we knew, if we could only know, but it's so complex, and we don't have the possibility of interviewing anybody after the fact to figure it out.
Let me just turn then to what I wanted to ask. The other thing I wanted to ask about, which is. You were asked earlier about, Mr. Harris, about the training that is there for case managers. What about, obviously there's the contract with PCVRS and they deal with vocational rehabilitation, but obviously they're going to encounter veterans that are in these scenarios. What sort of training is there for those individuals, and what sort of process is there in place for if they encounter a veteran who they believe might be suicidal?
So it's very similar, and so just to clarify, PCVRS, which helps to deliver the rehabilitation program for Veterans Affairs, is more than just vocational rehabilitation. It's medical and psychosocial rehabilitation as well. So the individuals who work and assist in that area have similar training to that at Veterans Affairs in terms of suicide prevention and discussions around suicide, as well as all of the health professionals who work under that area as well to deliver those kinds of services too.
Okay. So I actually had some indication that PCVRS really feels there's a struggle that they face when they counter a veteran that is suicidal. What I've been told is that in those scenarios, they are sort of under the, I guess, orders, for lack of a better way of putting it, to direct that person just to like the local emergency room or some kind of crisis service. And then often what happens is that that veteran gets turned away because they're supposed to come back to Veterans Affairs. And what they're saying is that when they bring that into the Veterans Affairs chain, it then leads to lengthy processes and wait times in order for that veteran to get help. And I think when we've got someone who is suicidal, like if we're going back to now this 22-week standard for someone to get, like if someone's suicidal, that's almost half a year. That's a real problem. And if that's what's happening, I guess I'd ask you just to address if that's what's happening. How the heck is that considered providing a proper service for a veteran that could be suicidal? And is that maybe the explanation that suicide amongst veterans are that much higher than the general population?
Very briefly, to answer the question.
There are a couple of different issues being addressed here. If somebody approaches PCVRS and has an issue, suicidality, or demonstrating that, they should actually be working with the experts and professionals in that. While people are trained, they are not necessarily experts in mental health and what have you. We want them to be able to go there. With respect to their disability claim, if there are elements of suicidality and suicidal ideation, there is a process to be able to accelerate their claim as well. So it's not a question of sending somebody back to waiting for 22 weeks to get an answer for something. In cases of suicide, it's to be dealt with immediately.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Mr. Clark, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to ask a couple of questions around the rates that have been mentioned. As we said earlier, it's been quite constant over time, over 50 years, I guess now. Is that, and you may not know the answer to this, but is that the same in the general population as well? Is the rate kind of flat over that period of time as well, or do we know the answer to that?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. The rate is higher in the veteran population. So 1.4 means 1, so if you, it's a comparative rate. So if there's 1 per 100,000 in the general Canadian population, we have 1.4.
I see.
For women, 1 in the Canadian population, it would be 1.8.
I see. I understand. Thank you for that. And on the the male-female split question, I'm correct to say that it's higher, the rate for female veterans is higher than it is for male veterans, correct?
It is.
And in the general population, this is off the top of my head, so I may be wrong on this, but it's the inverse, correct? Like the general rate is higher among men, generally speaking, than it is among women. Is that true?
I would have to defer to my colleague, Dr. Hall, on that.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the risk in female veterans as related to the general female population is higher than it is for male veterans. The risk is elevated for both, but the risk is higher for female veterans. Now, when we look at the rates of suicide in male veterans and female veterans, actually the rate of suicide in male veterans is quite a bit higher. It's about double that of female veterans. So just to make that distinction, and that does reflect trends that we see in the general population in terms of men and women.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that. So Dr. Hall, the gender split, I guess, if I can say that, among veterans mirrors, generally speaking, what we see amongst the Canadian population.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, understood. Thank you for that clarification. I think I'll share my time now with MP Hurdle as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The Surgeon General's Health Research Program directs, supports, and assists in the research, technology, analysis, and more of outcome-based science and technology initiatives that affect the performance, health, and welfare of all the Canadian fighting forces wherever they serve, protecting Canadians at home and abroad. What are the objectives of the program, and can you share how it helps CAF members with their mental health?
Madam Chair, thanks for the question. So the Surgeon General Health Research and Innovation Board has multiple domains, one of which is mental health. And really the focus of that is we look for either internal, meaning our colleagues within health services, or external to submit research proposals. We also, through a memorandum of understanding with our colleagues at Veterans Affairs, help sponsor other research-related programs on mental health. So really, as there's lots of interest in mental health, upcoming soon through the Canadian Institute of Military and Veterans and Families Health Research, we're going to have a forum here in Ottawa where a large amount of that research is actually going to be on display. So I would encourage folks on this committee to attend and take advantage of all that research. So there's a lot of collaboration on the research front related to mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. And have you received any? What feedback have you received? I guess I would ask on the program.
So the program is broad and not just specifically focused on mental health. It's also all facets of military life, from deployed operations to new innovations and medical equipment. We continue to make good advancements. Again, as was mentioned earlier, looking at new and novel treatment options. So overall, it's been positive, and the engagement of the broader public safety community has been of benefit too. So we're sharing that knowledge with our colleagues from the public safety, whether it's the mounted police or fire and other first responders.
Thank you.
Mr. Tomey.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to recap because I feel after going through the last bit of questions, we have a blind spot. And I think we need to address it. So we have someone who serves in the military. They've got their comrades, their buddies, that can recognize through their body language, their demeanor, that they may be having suicidal thoughts. They retire. And then they call VAC and they access the services, but the case manager is either through phone or by email. Now, I know you said that they've got training, but I'm finding it hard to believe that they can recognize the way that a comrade can someone that's suffering from depression. And unless they come forward, those are the ones that we're concerned about. The ones that don't come forward, the ones that are not stepping up to the plate. And it was shared that their spouses, unless their spouses are given permission from the vet to access, they can't help. So we have a blind spot, and we need to address the blind spot because every life matters. So I don't know if that's been recognized or not, but I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Madam Chair, I share the member's concern. We want veterans who are at risk, who may be suffering silently or secretly, to come forward. The issue that's raised is, if you're not already a client of Veterans Affairs, how do you get them forward? It is everybody. It takes community. And so you've referenced folks like Battle Buddies. Regimental associations have information. People get together regularly. When people leave the military, they stay in those groups. They stay connected, and it does take other individuals. Now, a family member can't necessarily come forward and access services, but a family member can certainly help the veteran come forward, connect the veteran with services that are available to them, whether they're through Veterans Affairs or whether they're through multiple other community organizations that are there to help. We are specifically there to help veterans, of course, but so are multiple community organizations that could help as well. And I just want folks and veterans to be able to come forward, supported by their families, supported by their battle buddies, their former regiments and others, to come forward so that we can be able to be in a position to help them.
How much more time? 2 minutes. Okay, because the tragedy of losing someone to suicide, the prevailing comments are, we didn't know. We didn't know what they were experiencing. And I think we've got tools, and I think we've got opportunities here to recognize, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about suicide prevention. And so I have a question. Those that are serving in the military that have been recognized to require help because they've been struggling with that, how is that transferred into Veterans Affairs? Or is that another voluntary thing, or is it flagged on their file?
So there's a lot of different ways that can happen. The easiest way that I could identify for you, and it's not the only way, but it's through the transition interviews that General Menard spoke about earlier as well. We do get files, and if someone's being released for a medical reason, which may have a relationship to suicidal ideation or attempts or things of that nature, that information is transferred. As we speak to veterans as they're releasing through a transition interview process, we're going to have conversations around those kinds of things and be able to identify them so they are noted.
Okay. Well, I mean, for anybody that's watching this committee that is suffering or needs help, please come forward. Please access the services that are there for you because you matter. And it's just a public service announcement, and it may seem corny, but there's people out there that we care about that need to be looked after and cared for. And so thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess this would be a question for the generals from D&D as well. Does D&D also track statistics around suicide for active members, and how would that compare to the rates that we see with Veterans Affairs?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So yes, so publicly available is our annual study on suicide mortality, and we do track those. So again, the data that we're looking at is from 2002 up till present. So the 2025 study is going to be published imminently, but all of the rest of them are available online. And again, while on any individual year there may be slight blips in the number of suicides that there are, it's been generally stable, and on average we're looking at about 15 suicides per year. In the last published report, we were looking at 21, 17 regular force, and 4 in the reserve. And again, as was stated by my colleague from Veterans Affairs, Dr. Courchesne, most of those are male. As I mentioned, 2 were female. They tend to be individuals within the ranks, so not officers. And we noted within that many suffer from mental health related issues, be it depression or substance abuse being the most prominent. And factors that represent triggers for them can be breakup in relationships, financial issues, problems with the law, or overall struggles with work performance.
And thank you, Major General. And from a rate standpoint, how does that compare to the rates that we would see at VAC?
Generally aligned on that front. In fact, the numbers I think are almost exactly the same. Again, we're looking at very statistics. So again, being very clear, any suicide is one suicide too many. But from a statistical perspective, the numbers are small, making this is the reason why we look at 5-year blocks as opposed to single-year blocks. I defer to my epidemiologist colleague from Veterans Affairs to sort of work through the nuances of that how you work that data. But generally, we're looking at 5-year blocks, and in those 5-year blocks, the rates have been generally stable, albeit elevated from Canadian population at large, but stable over those periods of time since 2002.
Right, and I guess this would probably be a question now. Thank you, sir, for Mr. Harris. The rates that we experience in Canada, do we have a sense of how those compare to peer countries, and what would those peer countries be? Would we look at G7? How do we, if we do assess that, how do we assess how we do relative to others around the world?
I think I might ask Dr. Hall whether she has some insight on that.
Got anything?
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have looked at trends in other countries as well, and so there are some similarities and differences. So, for example, we've seen, in the U.S. and Australia and the United Kingdom, they've also found that young male veterans are at the highest risk of suicide. We've seen suicide rates among veterans in Australia remaining stable over time, similar to the Canadian situation. But, in the U.S., rates have actually increased. They've decreased in the U.K. So there are a lot of differences, and we do work with international colleagues across the Five Eyes countries to try to understand what trends are looking like across our respective nations.
Appreciate that. And one final question, perhaps, for General Menard. You mentioned the 6-month transition period. Has it been 6 months for kind of as long as we know, or was it ever a different period of time?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So when I talk about the 6 months, is we encourage members that are thinking about retiring to come and see us. So there's no set time frame for them to come and see us. It can go up to 6 months before retirement, but we encourage them to come and see us so that we can evaluate their situation and provide support options as we develop that picture about the person. But it's all person dependent, so we don't have specific set standards for that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize. Madame Gaudreau.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Ms. Gaudreau, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like us to really speak honestly. 40 years later, things are stable. There is progress. Programs are being launched and are underway, but I have a question. I'm thinking of what happens in other areas. Let's think, for example, of healthcare workers, those working for Veterans Affairs. To, really raise a flag, you need to get engaged and you need to start signaling, raising your hand. And if this has been ongoing for several decades, do you think that your professionals and perhaps even yourselves are able to state that, with all this time that's gone by, I may just have been worn down. I may not be as compassionate as I might have been at the outset. And this might be an enormous problem and might explain the gap between we would like to and we're getting better, but we don't seem to be succeeding. I would like to hear you on this concept. And do you have any hope that when the red flag or engagement really finally sets in, 22 weeks of wait time, well, of course, one person, it should never happen, not even once. And you're quite right, this should never take place. And this is a lack of respect for our veterans, our being unable to provide services that make a difference. So do you think that their compassion, yes, it's there, but it's been worn down? Thank you for the question. Madam Chair. Allow me to state clearly that health professionals at Veterans Affairs do not provide services directly to veterans. Veterans receive their services from, or access their services in their communities under provincial programming. Of course, our professionals, some of them, healthcare professionals, at Veterans Affairs carry out evaluations. They visit veterans at home and they are trained to recognize red flag symptoms and so on, but we do not provide the services. My colleagues in the armed forces do provide services directly to their members. Thank you very much. Over to Ms. Vakenthal. 5 minutes, Madam.
And really do appreciate the conversation taking place here today. I have a real concern about this next report that's coming up over the course of this last decade, roughly 2017 forward. We know that it takes a long time for veterans to sometimes come to the point where they would consider suicide, not succeeding the way that they would hope. I'm concerned that the numbers that you're going to see in relation to what I'm hearing, how you can gather those numbers, isn't going to be accurate. I have a good friend, veteran, who served in Somalia and has followed everyone he served with. And the numbers that have taken their lives over the course of these last years is significant, but I don't have the confidence that you know. So is there any mechanism or tool that you can use that maintains privacy but gives comrades, mothers, family members the opportunity to give you that information on veterans that have, for sure, committed suicide or perhaps even attempted suicide that I'm thinking we're not aware of. We can't be confident that what we're learning is accurate in regard to the number of veterans that are choosing suicide.
So, Madam Chair, maybe I'll start. Family members and others can report suicides to Veterans Affairs Canada, although they're not obligated to report that it was a suicide. In some cases, we may hear that there was a veteran death and not a suicide and what have you. I'll ask Dr. Hall to answer your question specifically where the data comes from to ensure its authenticity about and its completeness in terms of where it comes from, because it's important. It's not self-reported data. It's important to recognize that it actually comes from a very reputable place. And
Yeah, I'm not questioning that,
Okay.
but that's fine if she wants to share that. That would be fine with me.
Sure.
Just
Go ahead, Dr.
briefly.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Yeah, so within the veteran suicide mortality study, it's correct, we aren't able to add a great deal of additional information about risk factors or experiences to that database, although we are looking at options to expand. We're performing a new linkage this year, and there might be more information on risk factors that we can look at. There's also another population-level survey called the Canadian Veteran Health Survey. This is basically, it was conducted for the first time in 2022, and it looks at veterans who identified themselves as such in the 2021 census. That survey captures information on suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, so that might be another way that we, another source of information that we can use to understand
Thank you.
what's going on in veterans.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. So when will that next report be released that you're doing to update?
The updated information from the veteran suicide mortality study, we're looking at, we're in discussions within the department for when that report can be produced and released. That would be in 2026 at the earliest. And then the Canadian Veteran Health Survey that I mentioned with information around suicidal ideation and attempts, that information is available now, and that will be followed with new information from the 2024 Canadian Veteran Health Survey.
Okay, so those are accessible to the committee. Could they be provided to the committee? That would be great. Okay. Still a moment? 40 seconds. I just have a question around, you were talking about some of the issues for those who possibly do end up committing suicide or attempting, and you talked about substance abuse and addiction and depression. Is there any knowledge or understanding of whether those conditions were causal or a response to a bigger issue that ended up causing them to go the direction that they are going? We often get the impression that these individuals come out with these conditions of abuse when it probably is in result of facing challenges that they couldn't cope with.
Trying to establish that causal link is extremely difficult, and I'll just say in that vein, we've seen that while mental health features prominently, at times that mental health is a result of a physical issue that led them to break from their routines, which may then lead to mental health and other things. So it's extremely difficult to make those causal linkages. And in fact, we've just identified risk factors rather than the causal linkage there. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Merci beaucoup. Madame Hurdle.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hurdle.
You mentioned 5-year blocks, and I'm just wondering if COVID played into that. Did the pandemic, did you see any kind of a tick up or tick down during the pandemic years in suicides?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So it's remained stable through that, and while again it's how the blocks play out as well. And what happens is we use a again, Dr. Hall helped me out on some of the more statistical, technical terms, but we use that sliding 5-year average. And really, while we publish the report annually, our move will be to try to move to 5-year blocks so that we can give it the firm 5-year blocks rather than moving. So again, depending on how you lined up that 5-year block, it cut off part of the pandemic. So things have remained globally stable with our data from 2002 to the 2024 report.
Right, interesting. Thank you. Does the department follow support efforts that are working in the community? Community service groups? Is there any liaison there? No? Anybody?
All of us looking at one another. Apologies. I think, we have I mentioned earlier, a VAC assistance service that's provided from Veterans Affairs. It's actually delivered through Health Canada. It's the equivalent of the Employee Assistance Program, but slightly scaled. We do get some follow-up from those kinds of organizations. Another member mentioned earlier whether or not other organizations that are either assisted by Veterans Affairs or who we work with come back to us with, either instances or anything that they might see as trends. They do as well. And so when we talk with our own service providers who may have direct contact with veterans on a regular basis, we want to hear back from them as to difficulties that they're encountering, difficulties that they're seeing amongst the veteran population as well. So there is a good discussion amongst that. There's also good discussion amongst things like the Centers of Excellence that we have. We have 2 Centers of Excellence from Veterans Affairs, one on PTSD and other related mental health conditions and on chronic pain. As Dr. Malcolm said earlier, there are a whole host of related issues to chronic pain and issues of, perhaps suicide as well. And so we do have those connections on a regular basis, both from a research point of view and sort of a sometimes more anecdotal approach.
Thank you. I'll pass the rest of my time to MP Sidhu.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question. The Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs Canada launched a joint suicide prevention strategy in 2017. How will you be able to measure the strategy's success? Any department can give the answer.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. As mentioned, it's we continue to follow through rates, which is an indirect indicator for us of the success of the strategy. But since right now we've measured the rates up until 2016, we'll have to wait for the first 5-year block to see if there was any effect of that. But regardless, we know that all the measures we have put in place were good measures, were improvements on things we had done in the past. And like I mentioned, it's difficult to prove something that didn't happen or to demonstrate or measure that something didn't happen. So we have to rely on statistics and measuring trends over time to see if there are any effect or any changes.
Thank you. Do I have more time, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
So, and follow-up question to the WAC, do you consider maintaining the operations of physical WAC offices are important in providing suicide prevention services for the veterans?
I apologize, I just missed part of your question.
So do you think maintaining the operations of physical WAC offices are important to providing the important suicide prevention to the veterans?
Absolutely. I think that being able to come into an office if you want to is very important. We've had about 50,000 visits since the office reopened since COVID, in-person visits with veterans and families, and that as an option for veterans is very important.
If this federal government did not reopen the 9 VAC offices in 2016 that were closed by the previous government, would that have impacted veterans in local areas and access to VAC services?
We would still ensure that veterans could access services, but they could access them remotely, but they wouldn't have had an opportunity to come into those local offices.
So I want to say merci beaucoup. Au nom du comité.
Thank you very much. Speaking for the members of the committee, for all of us, thank you so much for having joined us. We will suspend briefly to be able to thank you personally, Dr. Courchesne, Dr. Hall, Mr. Harris, Surgeon General Malcolm, and Commander Menard. Thank you for having spent nearly 2 hours with us so early on a Thursday morning. We will suspend briefly, and then the members will return to look at our calendar.
Je peux te faire ça? Oui. OK. J'aimerais réinviter les...
I would like to call you back to order. Members, thank you for your time. I have a few technicalities to address.
All in sync. Donc, notre prochaine réunion aura lieu
Our next meeting will take place on Tuesday, October 7th at 3:30 in the afternoon. We will pick up on our study on suicide prevention among veterans.
to briefly discuss a scheduling proposal. Pursuant to this motion adopted on September 18, 2025, once the committee has completed its study on suicide prevention, which most likely will be until the end of October, its next study will be on barriers to entrepreneurship for veterans, and this new study will likely begin sometimes in November. So is the committee ready to agree that the deadline for members to submit their list of proposed witnesses be Friday, October 24th at 4 p.m.? And on voudrait juste avoir une entente.
We just need to agree so that the names can be sent to our clerk so that we can continue or basically start the new study, if possible, in November. We'll see how things go. But we need to at least have some names so we can launch the process for the upcoming study. Do you all agree?
Basically, according to our subcommittee report and pursuing to that order determined on September 18, we would go to barriers to entrepreneurship for veterans. So that would be sometimes in November. And leading to that conversation, we would like all of you to send names of possible witnesses. And the date proposed is Friday, October 24th at 4 p.m. Is that agreeable? Parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Very well, thank you.
I would like to ask if the committee is ready to adopt the budget for the September 18 briefing on trauma-informed practices and the budget for the September 23rd briefing with the Veterans Ombuds. The budgets were distributed by the clerk on Wednesday, October 1st. J'ai besoin juste, it is the will of the committee to adopt these two budgets. On dit oui.
Do I see a yes? Excellent. Thank you so much.
Adjourn the meeting. Oh, really?
Just a couple questions. You mentioned that our next meeting next week will continue on this study. Do we know who the witnesses will be at this point? And I've got a couple other questions, so maybe I'll just ask them all at once, and you can answer them all at once. Next question was how many witnesses were submitted overall for the current study, and then how are we generally planning to lay out the panels for that in terms of number of witnesses, how they'll be structured, and how that'll all be grouped.
Monsieur Greffier.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Richards. For our next meeting on October 7th, there will be 5 witnesses, 2 from the Atlas Institute for Veterans and their Families, 1 from the Wounded Warriors Canada organization, 1 from the Veterans Association Food Bank, and 1 from the Veterans Transition Network. When it comes to the total number of witnesses, there's approximately 55 names that were recommended by members. And we will be, the current plan is to allocate those as equitably as possible among among the witnesses that were recommended by all the parties.
And so typically what we're going to do is do about 5 witnesses or so in a panel. Is that kind of our plan? I know sometimes in the past, I found what's happened is we've done, 4 or 5 in 2 different 1-hour panels, and I find it doesn't leave anywhere near enough time for questions for those folks. So I'm hearing we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with a panel of 4 or 5.
It will depend, right? Sometimes if individuals are here, if we have 2 individuals, we will allow a little bit more time. Having 3 witnesses for an hour, sometimes it is enough, sometimes it is not. So we'll play as to the value added. I want to make sure that all of you, like today, go through the full round of questions, that you have as much time as possible to share your perspective sometimes, but also ask the questions that will lead to recommendation for this report.
Okay.
Madame Gaudreau.
I guess just before we move on, I would just say this, 2 things. First of all, I would strongly encourage that we avoid the 2 panels for an hour thing as much as possible. I find what happens is, by the time the meeting starts, you go through this whole list of things that you need to preamble the meeting for. Then the meeting has to adjourn. People go and thank everyone. It takes 10 minutes before we start the next panel, especially that second panel. It ends up being that you don't even get through a whole round of questions. So I would strongly encourage that we avoid that as much as possible. That seems to be a lot of time wasted. And so I would strongly encourage we do that. And we may want to, given that, I know I'm surprised that the number wasn't higher in terms of the number of witnesses, because I believe we submitted about that number of witnesses ourselves. I would assume some of the other parties have also submitted witnesses. So unless there was a lot of duplication, I thought it might have been even higher than that. But with that number of witnesses, we may want to consider whether we want to add meetings as well.
So everything, like I say, for me is to create a structure that all of you have equal opportunities to ensure. We had said minimum of 6. If we need 8 or 10, I don't think that's something that's set in stone, Mr. Richard. So for me, it's very important. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that there's a structure in place and a calendar for all of you to know how we are going forward. Madame Gaudreau, je veux juste, avant de vous laisser.
Ms. Gaudreau, just to say that if you're missing something to decide how to plan the layout of witnesses, I think it's up to us, the members, to establish our priorities. And based on priorities to proceed, we know that there are some witnesses who likely have more information to share with us. So I think that for our clerks' work, it would be good to know if it's just testimony, personal, let's say, it'll be shorter. But if it's a specialist, let's not schedule 5 of them at once. So to all members, I would suggest let's establish some priorities and let's give a bit more information to ensure that we be as efficient as possible and effective. I certainly agree. So there's extraordinary work being carried out by our clerk, I assure you, with the assistance of the analyst. They are ensuring that the full set of witnesses does represent your requests and also the information available, but that we also provide information from specialists, but also people who have lived experience to be able to include all of that in our report.